If you have been feeling that there is just something missing in your history curriculum, you want to take a bit of a deeper dive, you want to help your children understand the bigger picture of history, well, stick around because in this video, I'm going to share all the methods of digging deeper into your history curriculum. No matter what style of homeschooling you are, whether you're Charlotte Mason or traditional or classical or unit studies, these methods can be applied in your homeschool. Now, they come from a Charlotte Mason and classical background, but anyone can really use them, and they're super easy to use. I'm also going to share all the extra resources that go along with that, and they're very inexpensive or even free, which is always a great thing. So if you're interested in knowing how you can take your children even deeper, stick around. So the best way to really study history are in cycles. Some people just want to jump into a specific era that they're really interested in, but the best way to really understand history is by going through it chronologically. Now, Charlotte Mason curriculums do cycle through history that way, as do classical. Not all history does it that way. You may just want to study, you may just have American history or world history in general. But the best way to study history is by cycling it through from the beginning. So ancient times, the first peoples, to the Middle Ages, to early modern history, and then postmodern history, or modern history, you may call it, not postmodern. And cycling through it that way allows you to touch on all the different time periods. Now you can zoom into different countries and places that you choose. In modern history, you may choose then to do American history or Canadian history or British history. But by going through it chronologically, your students really develop a bigger picture. Sometimes, if you will find that when you talk to your students about certain things, they will have no idea that one event you're talking about happened 1,000 years ago versus that's something that just happened 50 years ago. They don't understand that concept until they see it done in a chronological way, in a timeline sort of fashion. So the best way to do that is by following a spine. Now, there are many various types of spines. The one we like is Story of the World, but there's all different kinds of spines. You don't have to purchase Story of the World. You really could even follow encyclopedias if you want to. All you really need are events done in a chronological way, and then you branch off from those events so that you can go deeper into each of the stories at your leisure or by interest based, or you may just want to slowly go through all the major events of history, depending on how you want to do it as a family. Now, what I love about Story of the World is it's told in story form. It is dramatized. Susan Weiss Bauer is the author of Story of the World, and sometimes she will even add in words of the people, what they might have thought, what they might have said, and she adds to the richness of that. So it is dramatized, it is factual. Historians even sometimes disagree on certain events. So many history books will conflict in certain areas because historians don't always agree. But it's factual based on what majority of historians do believe, as well as, but it is dramatized. She includes stories, she includes folk tales, she includes legends of different peoples and places. So this will be an example of what a Middle Ages spine would look like. So you wouldn't get a spine of all time. That would be massive, and that would be really hard to kind of sift through. But we like to read through the entirety of Story of the World. We'll go through every single chapter. There's 42 chapters. And we've just finished this up and we have loved it. There are other spines that are a little bit, so this is a little on the thicker side. Another spine idea for the Middle Ages, just to compare, let's say, the Middle Ages, is A Castle with Many Rooms. This is written by Laureen Lambert, and it's something that Simply Charlotte Mason has produced. It's a little bit thinner. It does have some of the same stories that Story of the World has as well, but not as many of them. Now, I find the difference between Story of the World is it's storytelling, it's more dramatized, but the stories are shorter, whereas in A Castle with Many Rooms, it does go a little bit deeper into the story, but there are fewer stories that it covers. And it's not dramatized, it's less storytelling, and it's a bit more factual. but it's told in a way that it does draw in. It is living. It is written in a living way, and it does draw you into the characters and the people. It does this. It's written in a way that it does interact with you as a reader, asking you questions. What would you think of this certain situation and things like that? So it is talking to you in a narrative way. Another spine is even more fact-based. I had picked this one up. This is the Book of the Middle Ages by Dorothy Mills. And this might be really great for maybe a high school student going through the Middle Ages. It's very fact-based. It's written in a more difficult language. It does take exact quotes from different authors throughout time. So it's really a bit more like the encyclopedia approach. So it does just discuss the facts about different events and people throughout time, and includes maps and quotes from their writing that have been translated into English. Another great one that is available, which is free through the public domain, is the one that Ambleside Online recommends, called Our Island Story. And you can actually find that online for free. I found an audio version through, I think LibriVox is the name of it. I'll just put a little picture here for you. And it's an audiobook. It's that book read to you out loud. So that's another spine, which is the Middle Ages, but focused a bit more on British history, like Middle Ages up to modern times in Britain. But a big part of it is the Middle Ages. And so those are different spine ideas for the Middle Ages. Now, you'll start with the spine, but then you're going to want to branch off into different narrative storytelling and biographies. Now, there are tons of wonderful books that you can choose. You may not want to choose something for every single chapter. You may focus in on one term, on one group of people, or a specific person, or a specific event, and read narrative stories about those specific events and biographies about those people. Now, one wonderful place I have found where you can get a list of great biographies is called the Mesner Biographies. You can find his list anywhere online, but BiblioGuides has tons of book lists that you can choose from for various topics, but they also have all of Mesner's biographies. Mesner was a publisher back, I think, in the 1950s, and he published many of the great biographies, and they're really well vetted. They are, people like to choose his biographies because they're vetted, they're factual, you don't have to worry that there's some misinformation in there. And so there's a huge list of all wonderful biographies of people throughout history related to science and philosophy and the arts and lots of different things in his lists. You can choose books from his list and know that you're choosing a solid biography. And there's tons of other options. Ambleside Online has tons of book lists, so you can always look into their history cycles and pull from their lists. That's also free. We like to use the Story of the World's activity book, and with each chapter, Susan Weisbauer has a selection of supplementary reading, biography, living books that you can choose from. And these are things that I think it's good to select at the beginning of the term or at the beginning of the year, and choose to focus in on one or two of them and not try to read them all, because that would be pretty impossible unless you just wanted to read like a chapter from a book or something like that. She also includes picture books as well, which are great options to include. So now let's get to the meat and potatoes. So you would read your spine, you would read your living books. Now, of course, the Charlotte Mason method is to next narrate. So in narration, in the younger years, so from grades, Form 1s, grades 1 to 3, or maybe even as early as kindergarten, which is what we had done last year, is you can get your student to draw a picture about what they remember. But then after they draw their picture, you're going to ask them to tell you about the picture. What do you remember? And they're going to tell you in their own words. But then you will write out in a well grammatically formed sentence, so a single sentence. You can add on to that, if you feel that they can take on more, grades 2 or grade 3, maybe they can do 2 sentences and then maybe 3 sentences, depending on your own student. you will write out that sentence and get them to copy it. And you will get them to repeat it back to you as well, so that they learn how to not only write in complete sentences, but speak in complete sentences. Now you want to make it simple at first. It might just be a simple sentence, and then you will gradually build on that depending on your student. For Form 2s or the older grades, grades 4 to 6, you're going to get them to write out their narration in complete sentences. You might start out with saying 2 to 3 sentences, to then maybe, 5 to 6 or to half a page. And then for the older students, maybe they're going to write, a half a page to a page of retelling everything they can remember about what you read about. Now, it doesn't end there. Here is where the classical approach comes in. Charlotte Mason and classical really go well hand in hand, but here is where they differ. The difference is that in the classical approach, students, they don't understand which parts are important and which parts may be less relevant. It's important for the teacher or the homeschooling teacher to guide them and direct them into which facts are really truly the important facts. I just wanted to share that I came across something really interesting that really almost settles this argument, this sort of argument between, well, I wouldn't want to call it an argument to make it sound so negative, but this debate between Charlotte Mason homeschoolers and classical homeschoolers that, we aren't supposed to give our children the information. They are to take from it, get from the texts this information on their own without spoon feeding. We don't correct, that kind of idea. Now, I know that not all homeschoolers that do Charlotte Mason believe that, but there is a bit of that general idea out there that Charlotte Mason didn't do those things. That's more of a classical approach. But I've always believed that Charlotte Mason did follow a classical approach, but with a bit of a twist. So I found this very interesting article. And so if you've heard of Charlotte Mason, you've probably heard of the Parents Review, and it was a magazine that was released on a regular basis, written for homeschooling teachers and parents, so that they could know, it would be advice and tips and lesson planning ideas and things like that, written by teachers and principals and others in Charlotte Mason schools that were following Charlotte Mason's philosophies from the schools that she had started. And this is one of them, written by S. DeBroth. And this is one of the articles written by S. DeBroth, and I'm just going to read a segment of it because really relates to history, and I found it quite interesting. He says this: "The summing up of the salient points in each situation is an essential part of the history lesson. A well-known examiner told me not long since of a history teacher of quite exceptional ability in his presentation, who can keep his class white hot with interest, who is nevertheless unable to make his boys retain the connected history in their minds, so that each successive examination finds them with less and less digested knowledge. The reason was not far to seek. The iron was indeed heated, but the hammer strokes were not given. There was no summary of the essential, and it cooled again nearly into its old form." So what he's saying is that teachers do need to re-summarize the facts, give them all the pertinent facts. So we may let our students narrate and there may be a discussion, but within that lesson, we do have to give all the students the pertinent facts while the iron is hot, so that when their minds cool, they are given that information. And then you are reheating that with each review, each week when you're saying, okay, what do you recall about? And let's go through those facts again. Facts and memorizing facts really was a part of Charlotte Mason's philosophy. It's not so clear in her volumes, but when you read different articles from the Parents Review, these teachers in her Charlotte Mason schools were applying these methods to their teaching. So the next step onto this is where we would do what we would be our notebooking. In our notebooking, we may discuss through all the relevant facts that we talked about in the passages. And then I'd like to do is a word picture. So we will write out lists of all the things that happened in a certain timeline. Now they can write that down in their own journals. We like to draw pictures. So they'll draw a picture, they can draw a word map, draw pictures to go along with it to sort of talk about what happened in the event. So for example, at the end of the Middle Ages and Story of the World, we were talking about how King Philip of Spain, how he had made an agreement with Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth I, but it turned out that she lied. She wasn't planning on staying away from his ships. She allowed the pirates to continue robbing him, and so he declared war. And so he launched the Spanish Armada to come, and they were planning on conquering England. And so you're gonna talk through all those steps and draw the little pictures or the word maps and pictures and help them connect the dots to retell that story if they haven't done that in their narration. Now, older students will be able to do that, but it's also a good idea to recap all the points. Get them to write them out, either in list form, paragraph form, picture and writing form, but you will get them to put this into their history notebook. And it's really important for them to then go back and review it. And you will, in the next lesson, review those facts again, because the more you review, but that forgetfulness in between and then reviewing and jogging the memory actually helps to get that information deeper into their memory banks. It makes those facts become their own personal knowledge, and they then remember a lot of that parts of history. It's not about memorizing all of history, because of course none of us can do that. But we do want them to take it in and remember some of those facts. So by writing down the notes, reviewing them, asking them questions about it in the following weeks, you're really helping to solidify that information. And it doesn't have to take long. It's a quick, we've got a whiteboard. I'll write down the points on the whiteboard. We may make it draw it into like a little word map, and they will write them out. And then the next week we'll review them again. And it adds another maybe 5 minutes to your class time, but it really helps to solidify those facts. If you're just relying on narration and you're just relying on what they remember, what if they're not remembering all the facts? What if they're leaving out the most important parts? Like, for example, in this lesson on the Spanish Armada, my daughter's, the part that she remembered the most was the pirates, but she was not going to necessarily remember the whole point and purpose of what was going on behind the politics. And so discussing that together, in her own way, she's going into grade 1, but you can still discuss those facts together, put them together in a little tie line to give her just a bit more of a spine to her own knowledge. So then the next thing that we like to do is we like to then map out what the place we learned about. So a lot of people will do geography and history. If you do it this way, you really don't have to do an additional geography course, because all you really need to do is map out the places that you've learned. So if Prince Philip started in Spain and then he went to North America to try to establish colonies, and then in North and South America, they fought over the land there, and then he traveled back to Plymouth in England to conquer England, so you can kind of plot out, this is where they went, this is where they traveled, this is where their ship route had gone, and they show them the English Channel and all those things. And it really makes the picture come to life. So we do this in a couple of different ways. So let me show you the first way. So this is our world map, but we place their faces on the country that we're learning about. But then we leave dots on all the other places that we've learned throughout history. And these help us to keep track of all the places we've learned about and just recall, it's almost like an accomplishment to see, like, we learned about all these places on this map. But this is a fun way to track it. And if you just did this for map work, you're really doing a great job, but you can do more. And this is what I also suggest. And in the other way is by having like an atlas. So I like this atlas. It's DK's Compact World Atlas. This is the 8th edition. And it has all like really, really great maps, like very well. And you can find, a map of everywhere, and they're divided up by different continents and countries. But this is, and what we do is we find it on the map, we discuss it and look for it. But then I will also get my students to draw out the maps themselves, and drawing it out by hand. And you can even do map drills where you'll see how much of it can they remember from memory later on. But by drawing it out, that they're for sure then looking at the land, the shape of the continents, the shape of the countries, because they're actually having to draw it out rather than just looking it up. Oh, yep, here it is. Yep, I found it. There's the name there. And they're not necessarily looking at everything else, but you're forced to look at the entire map and the details when you have to draw it out by hand. Now, you don't have to do that every single time. I wouldn't say you'd have to do that every single time, but we did that when we moved on to one new major country or continent. We did at least draw those maps out at least one time in our history notebooks. Let me show you what one of those maps might look like. So this is another way that we have drawn out the map work, where you're just generally getting all the different shapes and names of countries and cities and bodies of water. And this is one that we had done for our geography lesson when we were studying Myanmar. And so this was, you can color it in, and it just gives the children a better picture, a mental picture of the countries and how all of the places connect and fit together. And this is another atlas that I really like, National Geographic's Student World Atlas. And this one includes a bit more detail when it comes to like there'll be different things talking about, this one here talks about producers and consumers, and in other maps they will show you what the climates would look like. So they have different colors representing different climates and things like that. And then what you'll want to do next is you are going to want to record it in your own history timeline, or you might call this a book of centuries. This is one I love from School Nest, and it's the History Timeline Notebook, a book of centuries to record your historical studies. This one is so fun. There are many kinds, but what I like about this, so this is ancient times, an example of that. And you would just find your spot along the timeline, and your student could either draw a little picture representing what you studied, or you could write the words in. For my youngest, I might get her to draw a little picture, and then underneath it I'll write in tiny print what the name of the event was. Between each of the time periods, there'll be a blank section where you can draw in pictures of all your favorite events or people or places that you learned about. And this goes all the way up to present time. In fact, in this timeline, it goes up to the year 3000. So there's lots of space, but this is something that we plan to hold on to for a very long time. My kids will keep them, and they can look back and reflect on all the things that they had learned throughout history. So you get to see these details, and you understand how people fit into history, and it just expands on that picture. If you are not Charlotte Mason or classical, or you don't feel that you fit in any particular style of homeschool, you can still do these things where you would read a history spine. You may branch off to a few other books, biographies and narratives that help to deepen the richness of the story. You then might go through the pertinent events and facts of that lesson, review them, write them in a word map, draw them in point form on your chalkboard or your whiteboard. You would then look at the map work, and that really helps you connect to the places. Seeing how far people traveled is always really interesting, and then recording those dates into your timeline. That is an amazing history lesson, and if you do that, you really will be giving your children the best foot forward in learning history, and history really comes to life. It is a bit dry and boring just to read a book, but when you do all of these things together, you're helping your children really see that bigger picture. And I really love, if you find history dry, read Story of the World. I find it the opposite of dry. It really makes stories quite exciting and fun. We are going to be going into early modern history this coming year, and we're really excited. I will be sharing all of our extra reading books to go along with that once I have them all nailed down in the near future. But I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.